You're on a journey through the Bible to experience the epic story of God and to learn your part to play in the unfolding drama. Prepare for your role as you learn your history, your enemy, and your king. Welcome to the Bible Brief. Join us today as we begin the Father's era of the Bible story. We meet Abraham, and we see great promises that serve as the bedrock for the rest of the story. You're listening to the Bible Brief. Humanity has taken two paths. One path is a path of walking with God, a path taken by Abel and Noah, among others, who, despite their imperfections, nevertheless walked with God and found favor with Him. The other path is the path of rebellion, a path riddled with murder, deceit, dishonor, and pride. This is the path of most of humanity. In the world outside of the garden, most choose the path of walking away from God. The world needs to turn around and get on the right path, but most just have no desire to turn. It's at this point that we meet a man from a city just southwest of Babylon, from a city called Ur, a place close to the attempted construction of the city and tower built as a monument to mankind. So far in the Bible, Ur is one of the furthest cities to the east. Since the garden, people have largely been traveling east. Adam and Eve were removed from the garden to the east. Cain was banished from an area of Eden to the east, and Babylon was built as people journeyed east. Early in the Bible, east is symbolically used as the direction away from God. And here we are in Ur, one of the easternmost cities mentioned in the Bible so far. Perhaps the city furthest from God, furthest from the garden, and deepest in the corruption of sin. And it's from this city that God picks his man, a man named Abram. Abram is a wealthy man living in the city of Ur, who comes from a family in a city that worships false gods. And yet the one true God decides that Abram will be part of his great plan that begins to take more shape with him. God says this to Abram, calling him out of everything he knows to a new future. The Lord said to Abram, "Leave your country, your kindred, and your father's house, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and curse those who curse you, and all the families of the earth will be blessed in you." So Abram departed as the Lord had directed him. This calling begins God's promises to Abram in the Abrahamic Covenant, a covenant with promises that we summarize in 3 words: land, seed, and blessing. The land of Canaan, seed or offspring in abundance, and blessing to the world through a particular seed of Abram. Outside of these promises, however, we shouldn't miss the one who's responsible for their fulfillment. God says, "I will," and he repeats it unmistakably. "Leave your country, your kindred, and your father's house, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and curse those who curse you, and all the families of the earth will be blessed in you." God himself is going to do these things. That's why he says, "I will." The only condition is that Abram has to leave his country, his family, and his father's household to go to the land that God will show him. Once he's there, God is going to do all these great things for him. And Abram, upon this call of God, he obeys. First, he goes with some of his family to a place called Haran, and then he brings a much smaller group down to the land of Canaan, the land of the promise, the land that will be taken from the cursed offspring of Noah's grandson Canaan, and instead be given to the blessed offspring of Abram. Abram lives in the land for several years, and despite God's promise, he begins to have questions about how and when these things will actually come to pass. He and his wife still don't have any children, and it's in the midst of wars and drama in the land that God comes to Abram in a vision. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. But Abram replied, O Lord God, what can you give me since I remain childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus? Abram continued, Behold, you have given me no offspring, so a servant in my household will be my heir. Then the word of the Lord came to Abram, saying, This one will not be your heir, but one who comes from your own body will be your heir. And the Lord took him outside and said, Now look to the heavens and count the stars if you are able. Then God told him, So shall your offspring be. Abram believed the Lord, and it was counted to him as righteousness. In the midst of Abram's questions of how these promises will come to pass, God reassures Abram by telling him to simply look up and begin counting. Each of those twinkling lights in the sky represents the number of descendants that Abram will have. God gives Abram a visual, and Abram responds not with doubt, but with faith. It says that Abram believed the Lord, and it was counted to him as righteousness. And don't miss this very important event. Abram believing that God would do what he said in the future results in something. It results in God giving him something now. God gives Abram righteousness. In exchange for Abram's faith, God gives Abram something that we humans can't get for ourselves because of our sin-corrupted condition. God gives him righteousness, a quality of rightness before God instead of wrongness before him. Abram's faith is counted to him as righteousness, a monumental moment in the Bible that serves as a template for things to come. After this incredible vision and confirmation of God's covenant with Abram, this father of a great nation continues living in the land. And still more years later, still without a child by his wife, Abram receives something else from God. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and said, I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless. I will establish my covenant between me and you, and I will multiply you exceedingly. Then Abram fell face down, and God said to him, As for me, this is my covenant with you. You will be the father of many nations. No longer will you be called Abram, but your name will be Abraham, for I have made you the father of many nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful. I will make nations of you, and kings will descend from you. I will establish my covenant as an everlasting covenant between me and you and your descendants after you, to be your God and the God of your descendants after you. And to you and your descendants, I will give the land where you are residing, all the land of Canaan, as an eternal possession, and I will be their God. In a further reiteration of the covenant, including many more I will statements, we see God continuing to state what he will do through Abram, despite Abram being 99 years old. And God emphasizes this by changing Abram's name. Abram, whose name means exalted father, gets renamed by God. His new name, Abraham, reiterates the promises that God has made. Abraham means father of a multitude. Despite the promise still remaining unfulfilled to this point, God is giving Abraham a new and better identity that corresponds to God's promise rather than Abraham's past. Abraham's identity has been changed by God. No longer will he be the childless, exalted father. No, now he will be the father of a multitude, promised to him by God. An identity in crisis, with question after question, is now an identity built on the promises of God. Now, as we think about this identity change and the identity crisis at the heart of humanity, we need to revisit the garden again, because identity is at the heart of the beginning of the Bible story. Remember, in the garden, God set up an authority structure, where God was on the top, then man, then woman, then the animals and the earth. If you reread the creation account, you'll discover something interesting. This structure is demonstrated based on the function of naming. God names the man Adam, then Adam names all the animals prior to Eve's creation, and then Adam names his wife woman, and then Eve. Each of these identities, represented by names, is carried forward in the story. Adam's name, received from God, simply means man. Eve's name, received from Adam, means mother of all living. Just in the first few pages of the story, we see that identities are being caught up in names. And this is a theme that carries forward especially in the first 5 books of the Bible. So it's not shocking that in this narrative of Abram, we're supposed to pay special attention to this name change. God is doing something new with Abraham. But notice another aspect of names. Names are given and not earned. Did you earn your name before you were born? Did your parents rename you after a significant event in your life? Probably not. Your parents simply named you, and that name stuck. And for most of you, you didn't even try to change your name. But let's even dwell on that possibility for a moment. Why would someone change their name? While I'm sure there are reasons beyond this, it's probably safe to say that people want a new identity. They want to escape their old life and create something new for themselves. They want a new identity, represented by a new name. Names are simply caught up in identity. This is why it's critical to note that identities are given and not earned. The Bible would have us realize that identity is something bestowed by someone else. Now, that's not to say that identity can't change. After all, we've just seen that with Abraham. The key is that Abraham isn't the one who changed it. God did. While Abraham was obedient to follow God's call to go to the land of Canaan, he still didn't do anything to change his identity. Remember the words that we focused on earlier as God made his promises to Abraham. God had said, "I will, I will, I will." God is the one who does the work. The human identity crisis so far in the story is this. Outside of a few people that walked with God, each generation tries to build its own identity apart from him. The people try to do things their own way instead of living in the identity that God gave Adam and Eve and then Noah. The people were to be fruitful fillers of the land, exercising dominion over it while they walked with God. Instead, the rebellion of humanity initially culminates in a people wanting to make a name for themselves in the city of Babylon. Humanity is in an identity crisis, and yet it's out of the midst of this crisis, from a city far in the east, that God makes a change. It's upon a childless man from a pagan family that we see God bestowing a new identity. Abraham, father of a multitude. Join us next time as we see Abraham finally have a son, before the story takes an unexpected turn. The promised son is to be sacrificed to God, but will Abraham obey the God of the promise?
For Bible readings, reflection questions, and quizzes, don't miss the Bible Brief app, available on iOS and Android, so you can go deeper into the story. The Bible Brief is a project of the Bible Literacy Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping you learn the Bible. Give to support the Bible Brief by visiting BibleBrief.org or tap the Give link in the show notes. Thank you for supporting the Bible Literacy Foundation.